Chosen one, there's something the world never saw, and yet it was real. It shaped you, it broke you open, it remade you. You crawled through nights no one asked about. You smiled when it felt like your soul was caving in. You gave when you had nothing left. And now, heaven is speaking, not in a whisper, not in a soft suggestion, but in a roar that echoes through unseen realms. Heaven is proud of you, not proud in silence, not proud from a distance, proud with fire, proud with movement, proud with divine. Celebration so loud, your entire atmosphere is about to change. Because what you endured in secretis, about to be honored in ways that cannot be ignored. You were never meant to be invisible, but heaven had to hide you for a while, not to punish, but to protect, to prepare, to build the kind of resilience that doesn't make headlines, but moves dimensions. This message isn't for the masses. It's not for those who need to be convinced. It's for you, the one who knows without being told, the one who felt before there were words, the one who kept going even when the light disappeared. You didn't ask for applause. You didn't wait for recognition. You didn't need an audience because your soul was never performing, it was becoming. And now, heaven confirms what you already knew in the quiet. You passed the test no one else saw you take. Stay with this. Don't look away, because something is awakening in you as we speak. Something powerful, something ancient, something sacred. You see, this was never about being perfect. It was about persisting. Every time you felt like giving up but didn't. Every time you held space for someone else's pain while carrying your own. Every time you chose grace over revenge, softness over spite, truth over comfort. That's what heaven sees. That's what gets honored now. You were not losing. You were learning. You were not abandoned. You were anointed. You were not behind. You were being built. And all the while, heaven kept the record. The tears no one noticed, the sacrifices no one thanked you for, the dreams you buried so someone else could rise, none of it vanished. It was stored, held, blessed, and now it returns. But not in the way you think. Not in gold, not in applause, not in popularity. The reward is something deeper. It's the peace that doesn't vanish in chaos, the clarity that doesn't fade when the world gets loud, the confidence to stand in rooms where you once felt small and know you belong. The reward is in your presence, your breath, your stillness, your ability to say, "I know who I am," without raising your voice. Chosen one, this is not empty praise. This is a spiritual verdict. The season of silence is ending. The veil is lifting. The shift has already begun. You're not being promised hope. You're being positioned in promise. That's why certain people had to leave. That's why certain doors stayed shut, no matter how hard you tried. That's why the more you aligned, the more isolated you felt. It wasn't rejection. It was redirection, not to a place, but to a posture, one of quiet power, sacred awareness, heavenly alignment. And you must know this. You did not imagine your calling. You did not invent your sensitivity. You did not overthink your destiny. It was real, all of it. The ache, the longing, the inner voice whispering, "Keep going, you're almost there." And now you are. This message found you not because you're broken, but because you're ready. Ready to hold what's about to arrive. Ready to stop surviving and begin inhabiting. Ready to walk into what you used to pray for, not as a stranger, but as the one who became it. Heaven saw when you turned down shortcuts, when you stayed loyal to your soul, even when betrayal would have felt easier, when you carried integrity through spaces saturated in temptation. When you gave up convenience for conviction. Have you ever wondered why your spirit kept moving, even when everything around you stood still? This isn't just a video. It's a mirror, a confirmation, a divine echo of the strength you carried in silence. And if something inside you is stirring right now, don't ignore it. Speak it, type it. Let the world feel what heaven already saw. Comment, I didn't quit if you feel this truth in your bones. Subscribe if you're ready to walk in who you've become, not as a seeker, but as the evidence. Your presence here means it's time. That is what brought you here. That is what makes you dangerous, not to people, but to every limitation that tried to define you. You've crossed a threshold. You no longer belong to the shadows you came from. Your light isn't dimming, it's declaring. So listen closely. The reward is not a prize, it's a presence. And that presence is you, awake, rooted, remembered. Heaven is proud of the you that no one clapped for, the you that cried through your breakthrough. The you that didn't quit when quitting would have made sense. You weren't waiting for this moment, you became this moment. And now everything is aligning, not all at once, not loudly, but surely you'll begin to notice it in small ways. The way peace lingers longer, the way people pause when you speak, the way your inner voice gets louder and your doubts get quieter. You're not looking for proof anymore. You are the proof. You no longer seek external validation because your spirit carries its own confirmation. This is the shift, and yes, the road ahead still holds tests, but you are not the same traveler. You don't crawl anymore. You walk with purpose. You choose with clarity. You speak with authority, and every step you take now echoes in places you cannot yet see. Because you're not just moving for yourself, you are shifting timelines, you are healing lineages, you are waking up frequencies that have been asleep for generations. This is what heaven celebrates. Not just that you endured, but that you elevated. That even after everything you still believe, you still trust, you still love. That is rare, that is holy, that is why heaven is proud. Chosen one, take this in. You didn't imagine the weight, you carried it. You didn't fabricate the fire, you walked through it. You didn't survive by luck, you survived by alignment. And now your story becomes the soil for someone else's hope. Let that settle, let that echo. This is just the beginning. Chosen one. There were moments, weren't there, when even your own hands felt too tired to keep holding on. When the silence around you grew so loud, you wondered if heaven had gone quiet too, and still you stayed. You didn't stay because it was easy. You stayed because something in your soul knew. This path wasn't just about surviving. It was about becoming. And now, heaven moves, not because you finally did enough, not because you earned it, but because the moment has come where the shift can no longer be delayed. The light you kept reaching for, it's no longer out there, it's you. You've crossed the line between hope and embodiment. You're not hoping to find peace anymore. You've become the kind of soul that creates peace, even in chaos. That is what heaven celebrates. Not your perfection, but your persistence. Not your trophies, but your tears. Not the moments when you felt powerful, but the ones when you had nothing left and still chose love. They didn't see you, did they? The ones you sacrificed for. The ones who mistook your silence for weakness. The ones who demanded your light but flinched at your depth. They didn't see the nights you folded your hands and cried into your pillow, asking if your goodness even mattered. They didn't notice how you broke quietly so that others could feel whole. But heaven did. Heaven never missed a moment. Every ache, every whisper, every step forward through unbearable grief. It was all counted, it was all honored, it was all recorded in light. And now, it is all being returned, not as revenge, but as redemption. You didn't lose anything. What fell away was never meant to walk with you where you're going. What cracked was meant to be cleared. What ended was necessary for your entrance into who you were always becoming. Let this truth settle deep. You weren't being broken, you were being birthed. You weren't being punished, you were being polished, because now you don't just believe in light, you carry it. There's a glow in you that no trauma could touch. A steadiness that no storm could uproot, a gentleness that survived the fire and came back glowing. You are different now, not louder, not flashier, but deeper. People won't always understand you. That's okay. You weren't made for common recognition. You were made for divine resonance, and now you are resonating so clearly, so truthfully, that everything not meant for you is falling away without effort. Don't chase it. Let it go. Let it all clear. You're not in the business of convincing anyone anymore. You're in the business of alignment, because now you've tasted something sacred. Now you've met yourself in the furnace. Now you've seen that you didn't come this far just to settle. You came to remember, and now you do. You remember what it means to wake up and not feel fear. To walk into a room and not shrink. To speak truth even if your voice trembles. That's the shift. That's the arrival. That's the reward. You didn't find the light. You became it. And now the universe recognizes you. Opportunities will start coming not because you chase them, but because they remember you. They match your frequency now. They respond to your yes. They submit to your certainty. You're not begging anymore. You're receiving not passively, but powerfully. Because now you know what's meant for you doesn't need force. It flows. What's sacred doesn't demand performance. It recognizes essence. And your essence? It's more radiant now than it has ever been. So, chosen one, do not apologize for what's leaving. Do not explain what's changing. Do not soften your truth to soothe someone else's insecurity. You've earned this clarity. You've cultivated this freedom. You've walked through fire for this peace, and now this peace is walking with you. Watch how things shift now. Watch how people respond to your silence. Watch how the old patterns no longer feel like home. That's not emptiness. That's evolution. You're not empty. You're expanding. You're not cold. You're clear. And clarity has a price. It costs you comfort but gives you power. You may feel alone for a while, not because you're unloved, but because the old ways can no longer walk beside you. That is sacred. That is holy, because you are not who you used to be. You are the healed version, the aware version, the trusted version. And heaven doesn't just trust anyone with light like this, but it trusts you. So protect it, not with walls, but with wisdom. Not with force, but with discernment. Let your boundaries bless you. Let your solitude feed you. Let your softness be your shield, because what comes next? It's not random. It's not luck. It's alignment. And you're ready. You didn't beg for it. You became it. Now receive it, not with fear, but with joy. The season of survival is over. The season of embodiment has begun. And chosen one, heaven is still watching, still guiding, still proud. But now it's not just watching, it's responding. Chosen one, how many times did you ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? You tried to do everything right. You loved, you served, you gave, and yet the doors stayed closed. The answers stayed silent. The blessings felt distant. You were convinced at times that something must be wrong with you. That you were cursed, forgotten, left out of life's unfolding miracles. But now listen, none of that was punishment. It was preparation. You were never denied. You were being refined. There are some things too precious to arrive early. There are some promises too heavy to carry before you've built the spiritual strength to hold them. That's what the delay was doing. It wasn't withholding, it was fortifying. You didn't lose time, you gained clarity, you didn't fall behind, you were rerouted to the front. And now, everything that once felt unreachable is making its way toward you because you became reachable to it. You don't have to chase anymore. You've shifted from pursuit to presence. That's why some people stopped calling. That's why certain environments began to feel suffocating. That's why silence became your companion. You were outgrowing the vibration of the old version of you. And now, what was always meant for you can finally recognize you because you've shed the camouflage. You've dropped the masks. You've released the expectations. And what remains is the real you, unapologetic, unedited, unshakable. This is what makes heaven proud. That even when you didn't understand, you trusted. Even when nothing around you confirmed your direction, you kept walking. Even when love left, money ran out, opportunities vanished, and clarity disappeared, you chose faith anyway. Not blind faith, but rooted faith, the kind of faith that doesn't scream but whispers. Even now I still believe, and because of that, doors are opening, not forced open, but unlocking naturally, because you are now aligned with what's inside them. This is the law of spiritual gravity. What you've anchored inside now draws toward you without effort, but don't be surprised if you start losing more before you gain, because this kind of reward, this kind of elevation, requires room, and room gets created by the removal of what's no longer compatible with where you're headed. You're not losing, you're being lightened. Heaven is not just blessing you, heaven is building you into a blessing, because now people won't just be inspired by what you say. They'll be changed by who you are. Your energy carries instruction now. Your stillness speaks, your silence teaches, not because you've become someone perfect, but because you've become someone present. Present to your own power, present to your worth, present to your inheritance. Yes, your inheritance. Because what's coming next isn't something you earn. It's something you activate. There is spiritual wealth with your name on it. Wisdom, provision, peace, influence, impact. And none of it comes from striving. It comes from remembering. You didn't get here by accident. You didn't survive this long for no reason. You didn't endure those silent nights of weeping just to return to average. There is something extraordinary unfolding within you. And it's not loud. It's not flashy. It's sacred. You are not who you were last year, not even who you were last week. There is a new language forming in your bones, a new posture emerging from your scars, a new stillness blooming from the place that once held only grief. Chosen one, your story is not one of delayed reward. It is a story of divine engineering. You were not forgotten. You were hidden, set apart, not to be ignored, but to be revealed at the right time. And this is the right time, not because everything is easy, not because you feel ready, but because your soul has reached the frequency of yes, and that yes is unlocking rooms that were once sealed. It's drawing in resources that used to overlook you. It's awakening favor that was waiting on your signal. This is not a coincidence. This is spiritual law in motion. Let others call it luck. Let others say you changed overnight, but you'll know. This was years in the making, built in tears, constructed in silence, designed in divine stillness. You didn't force it, you became it. And because of that, you'll keep attracting what matches your becoming. So stop explaining, stop defending, stop doubting. You don't need to be understood anymore. You need to be aligned. The right people won't need convincing. The right doors won't need breaking down. The right timing won't need controlling. It will all come because you are finally ready to receive it fully. So when it comes, don't flinch. When it arrives, don't second guess. When it knocks, don't apologize for opening the door. You've walked through fire to get here. You've shed skins you thought you needed to survive. You've buried versions of yourself that begged for love, only to rise as someone who embodies it. And now you're not hoping for your reward. You're inhabiting it, not in pride, but in purpose, not in ego, but in essence, not in noise, but in knowing. Chosen one, you're not becoming, you have become. Let this be the part of your story where you stop trying to prove and simply exist in truth. Let the world adjust to your frequency. Let the universe echo your arrival. Let heaven finish what it started in you, because you've entered the timeline where alignment rules over approval, where truth replaces performance, where peace outweighs applause. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment where the real story begins. Chosen one. Do you remember when you stopped trying to fit in? Not because you didn't want to be loved, but because every room you entered asked you to leave part of your soul at the door. They didn't know how to hold you. They didn't know how to hear you, because your frequency wasn't made for echo chambers. It was made for realms. That ache you've carried, the one that told you, no matter how much I give, I still feel out of place. That ache was not rejection. It was revelation. You were never built for surface. You were wired for depth, and depth makes people uncomfortable. Because when you walk into a room with authenticity, everything that's fake starts to tremble. And so they pulled away. Not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't ready. Not everyone is equipped to witness the kind of light that doesn't flicker. You didn't lose people. You lost illusions. You lost projections. You lost mirrors that only showed you distortion. But now you're standing in truth, not just knowing who you are, but becoming it. And when you walk in truth, you don't seek agreement. You carry alignment. This is why heaven is proud, not because you were flawless, but because you were faithful to your essence. Even when it cost you, even when it confused others, even when it left you walking alone, you didn't compromise, you didn't conform. You chose to stay whole in a world that worships fragments. That takes courage, not loud courage, but quiet, consistent, holy courage. The kind that prays in silence, that gives without needing applause, that stays soft even when the world tries to harden you. This is what makes heaven sing. You thought no one saw. You thought the invisible choices didn't matter. But they built you. They built your character. They sharpened your discernment. They carved space for grace to dwell. And now you're not just seen, you're activated. You're not just noticed, you're recognized. Because chosen one, you're no longer shrinking to survive. You're expanding to embody. You no longer apologize for your presence. You honor it. You no longer beg for crumbs. You claim your seat at the divine table. You no longer silence your intuition. You follow it, even when it leads you into the unknown. And here's what's sacred. The unknown is no longer terrifying. It's inviting, because your fear has matured into trust. Your restlessness has transformed into readiness, and your doubt has bowed to clarity. You didn't just make it through. You transcended. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been, beneath the layers of expectation, beneath the weight of performance, beneath the mask of needing to be palatable. You are not palatable. You are prophetic. You are not manageable, you are miraculous. You are not forgettable, you are foretold. And heaven didn't just randomly choose you, it designed you to carry this frequency, to hold this level of truth, to speak what others are too afraid to even feel. That's why the attacks came. That's why the confusion lingered. That's why the pressure kept building. Because you are not carrying an ordinary assignment. You were being distilled, so that what comes through isn't noise. It's nectar. It nourishes, it awakens, it confirms, and yes, there will still be days when it feels like too much. But you will not be overwhelmed. Because your roots run deeper now. Your foundation has been blessed. Your posture is steady. You no longer build castles out of compromise. You build altars out of truth, so when people ask, how did you become this version of you? You won't have a neat answer. You'll have a story soaked in grace, laced with grit, held together by hope, and it won't be told in timelines. It'll be told in frequency, because the old story was about proving yourself. This one is about being yourself. So don't be surprised if new doors open that you didn't knock on, if new connections find you without introduction, if resources appear without striving. You've aligned your spirit, and now creation must respond. This is not reward for doing. This is recognition for being. And now, you're not just receiving what you prayed for. You're becoming what you prayed to be. Chosen one, you're no longer a seeker. You are a seer. You don't wait for the signs, you are the sign. You don't wish for the shift, you embody it. And because of that, heaven is not just watching you, heaven is walking with you. Chosen one, what they didn't see, heaven recorded. What they misunderstood, heaven interpreted. What they tried to destroy, heaven defended. You see, the enemy never attacks what is empty. It comes for what is valuable. and for a while you thought you were cursed, when in truth you were carrying something sacred. You wondered why the warfare followed you, why the attacks came through the people you loved the most, why betrayal arrived from the ones you trusted, why silence surrounded you after you gave your loudest love. But now you know, you were not weak. You were worthy. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. The pressure was never meant to crush you. It was designed to clarify you. It exposed who could walk with you and who was only there for the comfort, not the calling. And now you walk lighter. Not because you lost everything, but because you released what could no longer come. This is the kind of freedom that costs everything you thought you needed, but gives you everything that's eternal. Chosen one, you didn't survive by chance. You survived because you were sealed. There was something about you that no darkness could fully touch. Even when your mind was weary, your spirit stayed awake. Even when your body was weak, your faith stood guard. Because somewhere in your soul, you knew. This storm is not the end. It's the evidence that something sacred is coming. That kind of knowing, it doesn't come from books, it comes from battles, and you've fought many, but now you are not just the survivor. You are the vessel, the carrier of revelation, the keeper of wisdom, the one who walks not just with story, but with substance. You no longer have to prove what you carry. You embody it. Your peace is your confirmation. Your boundaries are your announcement. Your presence is your declaration. You are not seeking favor. You are activating it by simply being who you were created to be. Let that truth wash over you, because what's ahead is not another test. It's a season of trust. Heaven is trusting you now with more than it ever has. Not because you begged for it, but because you've been built for it. The foundation you carry, it was formed in silence. The anointing you walk in, it was forged in fire, and now that fire bows to you. You no longer live afraid of the heat. You carry the flame. What once made you hide now makes you shine. What once broke your voice now amplifies it. This is why you had to walk through that pain, so you would know what you carry cannot be taken. Not by betrayal, not by delay, not by darkness. Your oil is internal, your light is eternal, and because of that you've become dangerous to every system that relies on you staying small. They won't understand how you got here. They'll say it was sudden, but you'll know it was sacred, built in silence, held by heaven, anchored in truth. Now you walk with different authority, not loud, not boastful, but undeniable, because your presence now carries proof. Proof that you can survive betrayal without becoming bitter. Proof that you can walk alone without losing your light. Proof that storms don't drown those who are anointed to rise. You didn't just endure, you evolved, and every time you thought it was over, you weren't breaking, you were birthing. This is why your silence was so heavy, why your tears were so hot, why your prayers felt like they evaporated. They didn't. They were planting something, and now you're beginning to see the bloom. Not in noise, but in knowing. Not in applause, but in alignment. Not in crowds, but in clarity. Chosen one, you were never overlooked. You were over-prepared, and that preparation has made you precise. You don't move from impulse anymore. You move from insight. You don't speak to fill silence. You speak to shift spirit. You don't ask for access. You walk in authority. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them guess how you healed. You don't owe explanations. You owe yourself continuance. You've been through too much to shrink for the comfort of others. Now you stretch in power, in presence, in purpose, and everything that comes into your life from this moment forward must honor what you've walked through. It must match your growth. It must align with your essence. It must be ordained, not opportunistic. Because this version of you, it's not driven by ego. It's anchored in eternity, and heaven is smiling. Not because you arrived at the mountaintop, but because you carried grace through the valley. Heaven is proud, not of your titles, but of your truth. Not of your image, but of your integrity. Not of your reach, but of your root. So chosen one, rest now. Not because you're done, but because the battle is. You've already won. Not by fighting harder, but by becoming softer. You didn't conquer the world. You claimed your soul, and that is the truest victory, and chosen one. You didn't rise because you were the loudest in the room. You rose because you listened when everything in you wanted to scream. That kind of restraint isn't weakness, it's reverence. It means you trusted the unseen more than the urgent. You didn't rush the process, you respected it. And now, the reward is not loud success, but quiet strength. The kind of strength that doesn't shout for attention, but changes the atmosphere when it enters. That's who you've become, a carrier of quiet thunder. You no longer explain why you're still standing. Your presence answers that without a word, because only those who walked through fire without letting it burn away their compassion understand what it means to glow from within. You didn't just survive the test, you transformed into the kind of soul that can carry revelation without distortion. That is rare. That is holy, and heaven didn't overlook it for one moment. It saw you when you sat with disappointment and still chose grace. It heard you when your prayers were quiet but your faith was roaring. It held you when you were too tired to hope but still got up the next day with purpose. Now you're not just walking into blessings, you're walking into evidence that faith does not forget, that surrender does not go unrewarded, that silence is not empty, it's sacred space being made for something eternal. And chosen one, you've made that space. You've prepared a place not just for breakthrough to visit, but for glory to dwell. That's why what's coming to you now is not a surprise to heaven. It's a response to the way you didn't fold, a response to the way you didn't conform, a response to the way you stayed true when truth cost you company, comfort, and clarity. And still you chose it. That's what separates you. Not your performance, but your purity. Not your perfection, but your persistence. You stayed close to the presence when everything else tried to pull you away. You believed the promise when your own reflection looked unfamiliar. And now you no longer walk hoping to be chosen. You walk as chosen. There's a stillness about you now, a weight, a calm authority, not born of striving, but born of surrender, not shaped by validation, but shaped by vision. So go ahead and breathe a little deeper. Stand a little taller. Smile without needing a reason. You've arrived at the threshold of what once felt impossible, not because you forced your way in, but because you became what it required. Heaven is not just opening a door, it's unveiling a mirror to show you what it always saw. And that image, it looks like peace, it looks like purpose, it looks like you. Chosen one, this is not a destination, this is a revelation. You are not just arriving somewhere, you are remembering who you've always been. All those years you felt behind, you were never late. You were being shaped. The detours, they weren't punishment, they were placement. The waiting, it wasn't delay, it was divine timing. The silence, it wasn't absence, it was alignment being whispered in frequencies only your soul could hear. And now, the reward isn't a trophy, it's a timeline shift. You've crossed into the version of your life that you always felt existed, just out of reach. But it was never out of reach. It was waiting for you to become the version of you who could hold it, because glory without grounding destroys. But you, chosen one, you've been grounded in grace. You've been tested in secret, refined in fire, trained in valleys, and heaven watched it all, not with cold distance, but with breath-held reverence. Because your path, your pain, your process was holy. You weren't just being protected. You were being prepared to walk in rooms where your presence would carry answers, not questions. You don't chase now. You draw, you don't beg, you bless. You don't wonder if you're enough. You know that you are what was written, what was waited for, what was whispered about in realms unseen. This is your inheritance, not just peace, but placement. Not just clarity, but confirmation. You are not hoping anymore, you are holding. And what you're holding now is more than breakthrough. It's becoming. Because heaven doesn't reward striving. It rewards surrender. And you surrendered when no one saw. You let go when it didn't make sense. You chose stillness when your flesh screamed for reaction. That is what heaven celebrates. Not your highlights, but your hiddenness. Not your perfection, but your posture. And now, you're not standing in a spotlight. You're walking in alignment. Every step forward now is not just movement, it's divine momentum. Doors will open because you're in the right vibration. People will come because you no longer shrink. Resources will gather because you're not afraid to own your worth. And don't be surprised when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You don't need to be understood in places where you were never meant to be small enough to fit. Because now you know your reward isn't applause, it's authority. You speak and hearts shift. You sit in silence and atmospheres realign. You move with ease because you're no longer dragging broken pieces of yourself. You've returned, not to who you were, but to who you really are. And that version of you, the anointed one, the unshakable one, the seen one, isn't fragile. It's fortified, because chosen one, this is not just about what you receive, it's about what you now release. You don't just carry blessings, you become the blessing. You don't just wait for miracles, you trigger them. You don't just pray for peace, you emanate it, and that's what makes heaven proud. Not just that you arrived, but that you remembered. You remembered that rejection was redirection, that loss was a lesson, that isolation was invitation, that every breakdown was building a doorway. And you walked through. You walked through shame and came out in strength. You walked through confusion and came out with clarity. You walked through darkness and came out glowing, not just alive, but awake. And now you no longer live for approval. You live from identity. You don't bend for belonging. You walk in belovedness. You don't whisper your truth. You speak it boldly, not to impress, but to illuminate. Because the world doesn't need more performance. It needs presence. And your presence, your being, your energy, is permission. Permission for others to heal, permission for others to rise, permission for others to believe again. That is the reward. That is the assignment. And heaven is not just smiling. Heaven is resounding, because you've become what heaven always knew you were. Now go, not to seek, but to serve, not to hustle, but to heal, not to explain, but to embody. Let your life be the sermon. Let your eyes be the invitation. Let your silence carry the message. I made it through, and now I make space for you. And if ever, again you wonder, am I still chosen? Let the earth under your feet, the light in your chest, and the whisper in your spirit say, yes, you are, you always were. And chosen one, as you step into this next hour of your life, not everything will make sense immediately, but it doesn't need to. Clarity will follow obedience, not the kind of obedience rooted in fear, but the kind that flows from trust. The kind that knows when heaven moves, you don't hesitate, you surrender. Because now your pace isn't set by panic, it's led by peace, and peace doesn't always come with confirmation. Sometimes it only comes with courage. You may still feel moments of uncertainty. You may still question, am I truly ready for what's next? But the truth is, what's coming isn't asking for your perfection. It's asking for your presence. It's asking you to show up as the person you've become in the fire, not polished, but pure. Not flawless, but fortified. Heaven isn't elevating you to reward your ego. Heaven is positioning you because your humility became a vessel. You stopped trying to be everything. You chose to be aligned, and alignment is magnetic. Not because it demands, but because it draws. You're drawing in things now that you used to think you had to chase, not because your circumstances changed, but because your frequency did. You no longer beg for love, you become love. You no longer plead for answers, you embody wisdom. You no longer hide in rooms you were designed to light. That's what heaven saw. That's why you were never left behind. You were being protected from anything that couldn't hold the real you. Because this version of you, This deeply rooted, clear-eyed, heaven-backed version is not just a survivor. You are a signal that light still walks the earth, that miracles are still unfolding quietly, that strength can still look like softness. You don't speak to impress, you speak to awaken. You don't exist to perform, you exist to remind. To remind the world what truth sounds like, what clarity feels like, what trust looks like. And if anyone ever tells you that you've changed, smile. Because that means heaven's investment in you is showing. You've changed from someone who doubted their value to someone who walks in divine certainty. You've changed from someone who clung to people to someone who listens only to God's release. You've changed from someone who needed proof to someone who became the evidence. So now, chosen one, don't look back. What's behind you is finished. What's before you is foretold. You are not in danger. You are in divine design. You are not confused. You are being called, and you are not asking for permission. You are already walking in purpose. Heaven is proud, earth is shifting, and you are becoming the answer to prayers you didn't even know were being spoken.